Hey, Ryan Williamson here with Sourwood Farm. It is November 6th, I believe, and beautiful day. We had a nice cool night, nice cold front moved in. So we were in the 60s today. Yesterday was like 70s. It was quite toasty, roasty. Tonight I think we're gonna get down to 33. So I'm going around the outyards doing winterization, and people keep asking me what I do, and I'm like, oh, I don't have time to answer. So here we go as a YouTube video. Getting ready for winter, as many folks say, it really starts in the summer. I generally start doing assessments for colonies in coming out of the nectar flow, so that would be in July, August. And basically what I'm doing is trying to pick what queens I want to keep around and which ones I want to requeen. And that's huge because young queens just do better through winter. There was one year where I requeened every single colony in my operation, well, pretty much every single one, and I also did a really good job of treating. I think my sample size was about 170 hives. Maybe it was 200 hives I went in a winter, but the main number I remember was I had no losses, 0%. So young queens, they really do make a difference. For years, I would look at what colonies I lost over winter, and in general, the trend I did see was old queens or swarms I caught. Why swarms? But if you think about it, the swarms are often headed up by an older queen. So we're back to old queens again. And that led me to just, wholesale requeening most of my operation. Although the big downside of that is it then is hard to really focus on breeding if you are requeening so quickly. So now I'm taking more risks in that regard and not requeening everybody. But as I decide that a colony needs to get requeened, I make sure they have a new queen going into the fall, and that I have found makes a huge difference for overwintering success, having those young, vibrant queens. Next item is mites. Yes, the good old mites. So in general, if I take care of my mites in the summer and fall, then I generally have really good overwintering. I would say when I was doing wholesale mite treating and also requeening a lot, my average winter losses were in the 3% range for 200 plus colonies. So that's not too bad. It's a lot of work, not very much fun treating colonies in the summer. Again, just like requeening, that was making me blind to my genetics, so I'm now taking much more risks in the sense of really doing more IPM, what the books say you should do. Letting mites climb, and if they do climb, then I treat. And if they don't climb, then they stay untreated, and those are my potential breeders for the future if they hold down mites for multiple years. So, mites, yes. The outyards I was at today, I don't know, treating half or a little more of the colonies, and the other ones showing good mite results, so they're staying untreated. And food is critical. Typically in the summer, I start assessing the need for feeding as our summer dearth hits. This year, though, we didn't have much of a summer dearth because of the spotted lanternflies, so I actually hardly had to feed colonies this year, which was wonderful. What a nice change. And, my goal through the summer is to make sure the bees stay healthy, are actually brood rearing, making enough population so that going into fall, we have a good sized cluster of bees. And then as the fall flow progresses, I generally don't feed that much as I'm letting the bees bring in, what's in the environment. This fall flow, though, was not very good. So I did have to start supplemental feeding, especially in this bee yard. I didn't feed all year until I would say late September, and then that's when I started having to throw jar feeders on so I could build up the weight for winter. And, arguably this is a little bit late to be finishing up, but here we are. At my home yard, I have found using jar feeders like this just makes a great, it works really well. So there's holes drilled in the lid. Bees can suck that syrup as they need it. This is probably my last liquid feeding for the year. I might have even pushed it doing it this late, but I had the sugar, so I used it. It's really neat seeing how some colonies, for various reasons, don't take as much sugar down. This one hasn't taken very much, and look at how hungry that one is. So sometimes then, if I see them like this, where there's almost none, either they're sick or they have propolized the holes shut, and I didn't realize that when I... Yep, I'm pretty sure that's what happened here. So this one's got propolized holes, and the bees thus are not even getting to the food. Hey, check out that propolis. Speaking of which, that's really neat. They've really worked on trying to close up the whole 2-inch hole. I normally, on my bee suit, have a safety pin on my pocket, so I would poke those holes. I don't have my bee suit on, so I can't do that at the moment. Another key or clue, if you don't have the holes open, is if you see robbing like this happening. So that often means that there's some syrup leaking out, and that can be caused by various reasons, but one of them is if those holes are propolized shut, you get a little air pressure up here in the air part of this jar as it warms up, and then that pushes out syrup and it has no way to go, so it starts leaking out around the threads. And look at those bees wanting to eat. So that kind of gives me a clue that I need to check on that jar or something else. But what I like is, see, here I have this robbing pressure up here. Down here at the entrance, everything is normal. That is really nice to me. Like, if I feed with jars, I really don't have much actual robbing issues. So here we are at the entrance, so let's jump quickly over to mice. So I use a lot of these bent up hardware cloth, this 1/8-inch hardware cloth. That's mouse proof. A mouse can't get in there. That one's a little bit smaller than a lot of mine. Over here I saw a neat one. Here's one where the bees decided they didn't want it all the way open, and look at how much they propolized that. I think that's really neat. This needs to get shoved in a little bit more to make it more mouse proof. The basic idea with these is I'm going to take this strip of hardware cloth and fold it typically to about a 3/4 inch gap. So during the high flight time of spring and fall and summer, they can have a pretty sizable gap. Often I'll have it angled out. But coming into winter, I can then slide it over and center it. And now I have a 3/8 gap on either side, and a mouse cannot get in that smaller gap on the sides. That kind of also helps reduce the chance of them getting blocked out, having too little entrances. Sometimes I'll have on these nukes an upper board hole open or closed. I don't know, not much rhyme or reason. I do use some wooden mouse guards too. Oh gosh, where's one? Here's one. So I generally like the larger opening. I can't remember when I've used the small one, so I'll leave them like that. Most of my bottom boards are homemade solid. Do have a few, like that's a screen one, and I've shoved in some random stuff underneath. Same here. Generally don't use very many screen bottom boards, but that one's got shoved in because it just never seem to have the chloroplast or whatever the sliders are that fit, because each brand has its own width, and yeah. Okay, back to feeding. So doing a lot of liquid feed. What I have found though is I can, the edge time of the year, spring and late fall, I can do the jar feeders like this pretty successfully. Trough feeders, or like here's the hive top feeder. Look at that, it's cold. They're not even up here taking the syrup. That doesn't work very well. So generally hive top feeders at this time of year when it's cool are a no-go. This was an experiment. This is a lid here where I've got 2 inches of foam that's shoved in here. So it's a little hard to see, but there's foam about that thick there. And I was just curious, would they have enough warmth? Would it warm the syrup up enough if there's that foam? And the answer is no. So we're going to go back to not using any hive top feeders this time of year. And yeah, I've also had issues where they drown. This foam, I'm putting on this little old cut up election sign because the bees will eat up the foam. I've painted it to help seal it, but they still like to chew. So doing this one-handed is always a little bit more fun. We'll do it like that. So as we move into winter, I should have, if I did my job correctly, fed everybody enough that they don't need more feed. What is enough? In a colony like this, ideally my cluster's down in this area, and then this upper box here is, at least here and up, that is honey stores. So again, my cluster's down here, honey's up here. I don't know the exact weight, but let's say in a colony like this, it's probably about 60 pounds of honey at least. So from about here up is honey, there down is for the bees. Quite often though, it's really more like honey in a dome like this, and then the clusters kind of like yay. I do a hefting if it's really heavy with one of these. I know it's pretty good. I just had extra syrup, so I went ahead and threw jars on colonies that probably didn't need it, but I figured they would put that syrup right where they need it going into winter. Feeding now is, I'm not feeding for next month. I'm actually feeding for February. My goal here is to get them well situated so when they start brood rearing, as the maple pollen comes in, if there's a cold snap or something, they can't bring in enough nectar, they don't starve. So really, I'm feeding for months ahead. Just like mites, you know, we deal with mites not for the present moment, but for the future issues of viruses from those mites. So feeding is kind of, we try to be proactive. Once these jars are finished, then I've got these little plugs. I've got these, you know, the lids have a 2-inch hole. Oh, I just threw syrup on, so I don't have, looking to see if I have any that have already emptied out. Ah, there's one. So here, we can plug one up and make a visual. So I can just put this little plug in just like that. Voila, ready for winter. And then in that situation, I would often put a brick over it. That seems to help protect this from UV light, and then also tells me, if it's like that this colony is fed up and ready for winter. And here we are, cool evening coming up, so I'm gonna just kind of shake those bees so they can walk in before they get too chilled. So let's say I didn't feed up enough and now the weather is cold. What do I do? Well, that's where things like sugar bricks come into play, or fondant. I've done a lot of playing around with sugar bricks. Generally, I don't do any sugar bricks till January, February, just on colonies that need it. Scored a really good price on fondant this year. So I got a pallet, 3,000 pounds, and the bees really are liking it. This is a colony, give me an idea. There they are working on that fondant. This is expired, so I think it started to I don't know what you call it, separate. So I got some granulated sugar there, and then the corn syrup part is, you know, pretty soft. So it's not perfect, but the bees really are going to town on it. This is how I like to feed if I can, is some variation like this. So I've got Reflectix. It could be any other type of bee-proof material, some type of cloth, something like that. The cool part with this is now this Reflectix is pushed off of the top bars, so it's actually giving us way better insulation. That little bubble in there isn't much insulation, maybe R1. Once we have air on one side, that jumps us up to, I think it was R4. Once we have air on both sides, it's more like R6. So with the shim here, now we have air on both sides for the reflective heat to get reflected. Oh, and this lid here, I had a bunch of floor foam squares like you would use like for kids to play under from an old craft show booth. I cut those out, so this has got a little bit of insulation as well. Once again, I need something like the Reflectix there to protect that foam from the bees in their insatiable desire to chew. So we'll put that one back together. It's good for winter, really. Make sure that's in so the mice can't get in. Oh, let's see. Up here, I have a colony where I'm doing a different way of feeding. What I found, especially with sugar bricks, was that the granulated sugar, a lot of times the bees would just haul it out the front door. They viewed it maybe more as trash than as food, and that became really challenging. And one of the things I found worked pretty well was to change the location. So they would view it more as something to go gather rather than something to haul out. So it's exterior of their home a little bit. So the bees are coming up through this 2-inch hole. Here's my fondant that they're chewing away. They've eaten most of it. They've chewed way back. It was all the way up to the hole. And then to make this environment moist, we don't want it to dry out, we've got the Reflectix here. Again, it's doing a better job of insulating because it has air on one side. really could be any other type of material that's bee proof. And this homemade lid has a piece of scrap foam shoved in the middle, so that gives us a warm environment so the bees can come up into this warm space to eat. I don't think this would be a smart way to feed if you didn't have the insulation up top, because then the bees would be coming up to a cold area to eat. And that is not so inducive for them to feed. So yeah, that's one way of feeding. I do have, oh gosh, a few other things going on here. The main thing now is I'm going to make sure that they stay well fed. Mice are kept out, so I still need to do some entrance reduced work. And then on the colonies I'm treating, I come through with oxalic acid vapor about 3 times. Late October, mid-November, mid to late November, and then again mid to late December. And that is just trying to clean up the mites, because at some point in that period, most of my bees seem to every year take a little break on brood. And then at that point, all the mites are exposed, and the oxalic acid vapor kills the mites on the bees way better than in the cap brood, obviously, where it can't affect them. So I never know when that broodless period is going to happen, so I just kind of try to get about 2 to 3 vaporizations in. Oh, I just remembered. At my out yards, I do this type of system for overwintering nukes. Typically it's 5 frames down here, and then upstairs is 4 frames with a frame feeder in the 5th place, so kind of like that. This colony actually didn't need any feed, so I never put the frame feeder in. And the frame feeders, I really like having a hunk of wood as a float, a little bit of electrical wire here to keep that plastic from spreading, either going in or out. That I find works really well with not too much drowning and not too many small hive beetle issues. And then I definitely need to put an entrance reducer in. Upstairs, I have a piece of 1 foot by 2 foot floor tile as a lid, a hunk of foam. And once again, foam needs something to keep the little chewing bees away from it. So we've got a material. Now here, I don't have an air gap. And this is really key. I found I need a thin material, not something that's thick and bubbly like the Reflectix. If I had Reflectix here, it pushes down and touches these top bars, and the bees can't patrol that area. See how here they're all up in the round. If they can't get up there and patrol the top, so the frames, moisture gathers. It's not bad, but it's enough that over the whole winter it starts to mold. It's not really moisture in the sense that it's dangerous to the bees, but it's just ugly to us as humans looking at it. If I have this thin material where it's not pressing down against the top of the frames, the bees can come up and patrol, and any condensation that happens up along this area, the bees can suck up and eat, and they need that, or drink I should say, they need that actual moisture in the winter, so it's good. But in general, most of the condensation, because I have 1.5 inches of foam, 2 inches of foam on top, most of the condensation is going to be on the outer walls where the bees can then collect it there. I've had really, really, really good overwintering success. I'm sure this winter is going to break my success rate on this, but using this trough feeder, 4 frames up above, 5 frames down below, I've actually never lost a nuke in out yards, and that's hundreds and hundreds over the years, overwintered. So go figure how well that works. We'll just put that floor tile back on. It's nice and heavy. I don't even really need a brick, although often I'll put a brick just to tell me that one doesn't need any feed. One of the other big challenges is, what do you do when you have weak colonies that you want to make it through winter? And you basically end up with two choices. One of them is to combine different weak colonies together to try to make one larger, stronger colony that has more stores, more bees, more chance of survival. That's what I did here. I had a fairly weak colony that I was doing an experiment with, and I took the bees and brood and everything out of that colony, basically moved the box, left the bottom board and lid right over here. You can't see it, but I put some newspaper between the 2 layers. This was Queen Right, also not a super strong colony, and the weak one had a little bit of an extra entrance there so they could come and go as they were chewing through the paper, added feed so they could all get along. That works really well, but maybe we want to try to keep everybody alive. And that's where we get into this technique here. This is another weak colony. It was just 5 frames of bees. I put it into a 10 frame box, and we have a inner cover here, a little bit of a plastic material, something bee proof, just to keep bees from coming and going, and a very strong colony down below. So at this point now, the heat from this strong colony can come up through this plastic and keep this weaker colony alive. I just used 2 building shims. So I got a building shim here, another one on the other side, and actually a third one here is an entrance reducer. So that basically, the idea is to give the bees a nice small entrance to protect. There's foam up top here for warmth to help them. And yeah, it's the heat from down below will greatly improve the odds that this weak colony will make it through winter. Sometimes the colony's weak, not for the fault of the colony or the queen, but for past history of neglect, or a weak split, or a poor queen that I'd requeened. There's the entrance for the stronger colony on the other side. A downside of this method, though, is if this weak colony was other side of the bee yard and I moved it over here on top of the strong colony, I might lose, well, I definitely would lose a lot of the field force, and that really weakens that colony further. In this case, the weak colony just happened to be right next to it, so I could lift it up and move it over a period of a few days, and that kept my field force. Otherwise, what I end up having to do, which is rather annoying, is take a weak colony away from, let's say, a bee yard like this where I have too many, and go take it to an out yard to put it on a strong colony. And that way, the field bees, when they come out, realize they're in a brand new spot, they're going to stay home. And that keeps that weak colony from being further weakened when I'm doing that manipulation. I dislike moving colonies, so I don't do that a whole lot. In general, I try to just keep the weak colonies in the same bee yard, and if I can stack them, I do that, or just, our Virginia winters are not so bad, so I can end up often getting away overwintering little colonies on their own. But there's no doubt the extra warmth from a strong colony down below will greatly help a weak colony if it's put above. So one of the things that we focus on a lot is equipment, and thus we have lots of questions about what is the best method to overwinter hives as far as equipment goes. And really the funny part is, the answer is it doesn't matter that much, at least here in Central Virginia. What matters much, much more is the colony healthy, and do they have enough food? And yeah, so if they're healthy and have enough stores, they can really survive through quite a lot. I have overwintered a nuke one time in a cardboard box. That was pretty amazing, foolish, but hey, it worked. I much prefer something with more solid sides, so thus we have mostly wood boxes here. I do have a few insulated plastic ones. Also, again, haven't noticed that much difference. I do have some colonies like this one here, which is more traditional with the inner cover. Actually, I have a little feed going on, but I'll take that off shortly. This will just be, vented bottom, screen bottom board, 8-frame box, inner cover, and lid. No insulation. Works fine. It's not really that big of a deal in this climate. Most of my hives, as you look around, are actually going to be much more simple. It's just a piece of Vantex subflooring or something similar that I've cut to at least the box size, and then painted. They last me 10 years or so. I kind of like it if they go out a little further. It gives me a little drip edge. In fact, actually, this one, this was an experiment where I ran a small bead of caulk around it. So, telescoping cover comes down, and that makes a really stout drip edge. This one just has a tiny drip edge that actually works pretty well. That allows me also to, because there's no inner and outer cover, I can feed with a jar right on the lid. Some of them are traditional made out of regular wood with a cleat. That works pretty good too. And then I've got a few, like we saw earlier, where there's some insulation going on. That works really well as well. So my gut is to insulate. I generally don't vent lids because I haven't found it to be necessary. And quite often, if there is some kind of upper vent area, the bees will fill it in. They propolis those things shut. Sometimes it's as simple as, look at this old piece of pressure treated plywood. That lid's been going for, oh gosh, I think that's been 12 years. not too bad for a junk piece of wood from a job site. Not perfect, it's got little warps to it, but let's just see. Quite often, it's hard to see in this light, but they'll propolis the little cracks shut coming into winter. And that's a big one too. The more we crack into the hives, we're breaking those propolis seals, and we don't necessarily want to do that as we head into colder nights. So I do try not to break open boxes. The most I'll do is occasionally crack a lid to do some type of feeding if I need to, or check the cluster. I try to do that on warm days so that the bees can repropolize shut. One of the neat things, if there is something, you know, some kind of material like the Reflectix or even this, is that kind of helps seal any gaps from when I crack the lid. So that's a bit of a plus to that material. But you know, some of my inner covers are as simple as cut up election signs. Some of them are fancier, like the Reflectix. This is another one of those buckets that the bees are cleaning out. So, oh yeah, just a few in there. They'll go down inside the colony at night. I went and messed that up by moving it. Yeah, so it's just really kind of nice that you don't really have to do, in this moderate climate, you don't have to do anything really too fancy. And the bees, as long as they're healthy, they live just fine through winter. We get a lot of flying days, so in the winter that's good in the sense that they can get out and do cleansing flights. A little more challenging in the sense they can use up a lot of food. But I don't do any pollen sub feeding through the winter, just more pure sugar in the form of a fondant or a sugar brick if they need it. And again, that's only if they need it. And generally that means I'm not having to do that until much later in the winter, like February, as they start brooding up and eating a lot. The bizarre thing is actually we often get warm days in February, and I can actually open feed over on the south side of the building there, or that shed, and the bees will take down far more syrup open feeding over there than they would ever do through a jar feeder or internal feeders. It's a little counterintuitive, but if I put one of these trough feeders leaned up against a south side of a building, bright warm sun on a 60-degree day warms that syrup up, and the bees will suck it down and take it home really fast. It's pretty magical to see. So that's been a lot of times my emergency feeding in this as we're moving in the spring, if there isn't a lot of food out. But it's a lot easier than getting out and filling all these jars. But there's of course some cons to that as far as you know, sharing disease or mites. Yeah, there's definitely. And also maybe stressing the bees out with just the flying. You know, flying actually does wear them out. And so I don't maybe do that in the fall because I want them to last through the winter. But early spring, is those field bees are timing out, maybe it's okay to open feed. I don't know. That's my thought. I could be so wrong. Oh yeah, I gotta love it. Oh, there's that. I needed to put this one in one of these colonies. Ah, there it is. So we'll just put this one in right there. So now we have a mostly mouse-proof entrance that the bees can come and go and ventilate through. I'm really excited going into winter, and also a little nervous. It's like one of those things where you just kind of do the best you can, getting all the bees ready, and then you hope for the best. And yeah, it's been fun. And once again, I've already remember one thing you might have noticed while I was walking around these taller hives. So what's going on here is a different type of feeding, in the sense that I sell a good bit of honey, and as I use buckets, I take the wet buckets and put them down in this cavity for the bees to clean up. So the bees are, you know, slowly working, cleaning out the buckets. This one's not quite cleaned out yet, but once they have that bucket cleaned up, I just put it in a few hours ago, then I'll take that one out and replace with another. Why am I enclosing it? Well, that allows me to crack the bucket up so the bees can clean the outer part. Doesn't cause robbing pressure, but more importantly, it means that my bucket stays cleaner. Bees flying over and not pooping on it. And UV light is not good for plastic, so this helps protect the buckets from getting weakened by the sunlight. And nobody likes a cracked bucket. That's no good. So that overall has worked really, really well for cleaning buckets out. I just pick a few hives to do that with, and so far I've never seen disease issues. Of course, I would never feed honey from a sick hive that I know about as being sick, but yeah, I haven't seen a sick hive this year really, so I'm feeding my honey back to the bees as they need it. All right, I'll catch you all later. Thanks so much for checking in, and hope you all have a great winter.